The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as princess and made her way through the familiar corridors that had witnessed centuries of royal history. Her riding boots clicked against the polished marble floors, echoing through halls that seemed unusually quiet for a Tuesday morning. The Princess Royal had always been known for her no-nonsense approach to royal duties, but today carried a weight that seemed to press heavily on her shoulders. And paused before the ornate doors leading to the private family quarters, her hand resting momentarily on the brass handle that countless royal hands had touched before hers. Inside, she knew her brothers would be waiting, William, now carrying the enormous responsibility of being heir to the throne, and King Charles, still adjusting to the crown that sat heavily not just on his head, but on his conscience. The past few months had been a whirlwind of change and uncertainty for the royal family. Kate's health concerns had dominated private conversations behind palace walls, while the public remained largely unaware of the true extent of the situation. The Princess of Wales had always been the picture of grace and strength, but recent events had tested even her remarkable resilience. As Anne entered the drawing room, she found William standing by the tall windows, his silhouette outlined against the pale morning light. His usual composed demeanor seemed strained, and she could see the tension in his shoulders. King Charles sat in his favorite armchair, a cup of tea growing cold on the side table beside him. Both men looked up as she entered, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and concern. "I've received Mother's message," Anne said without preamble, her voice carrying the same directness that had made her both respected and occasionally feared within royal circles. The envelope she carried bore the unmistakable seal that had been used for the most private of royal communications, the kind that never appeared in official records or court circulars. William turned from the window, his face pale but determined. The transformation from the young prince the world once knew to the future king was complete, yet in this moment, he looked almost vulnerable. "What did she say?" he asked, though something in his voice suggested he already suspected the gravity of what was to come. Anne moved to the center of the room, her presence commanding attention despite her typically understated appearance. She had always been the most practical of the royal siblings, the one who could be counted on to deliver difficult news without sugarcoating the reality of their situation. She spoke about Kate, and began, watching as both men's expressions shifted to one of intense focus. The relationship between the late Queen and Catherine had been one of mutual respect and genuine affection. In her final years, the Queen had often remarked privately how relieved she was that William had chosen someone who understood the true weight of royal responsibility. Kate's natural grace and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life had impressed the monarch, who had seen many royal marriages struggle under the intense scrutiny of public life. Mother was very specific in her instructions, and continued, unfolding the carefully preserved letter. The paper bore the Queen's personal watermark, and her distinctive handwriting was immediately recognizable to all three of them. She knew this day would come, when difficult decisions would need to be made regarding the future of the monarchy and the people we hold dear. Charles leaned forward in his chair, his fingers interlaced as he listened intently. The burden of kingship had aged him visibly in the short time since his coronation, but it was clear that family concerns weighed more heavily on him than any constitutional crisis ever could. "What did she foresee?" he asked quietly. Anne's eyes moved between her brother and nephew, understanding that the words she was about to share would change everything they thought they knew about the Queen's final wishes. "She foresaw Kate's struggle," she said simply. "Not just with her health, but with the impossible position she would find herself in as the future Queen consort. Mother understood better than anyone what that role demands." The room fell silent except for the gentle ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. William's hands clenched at his sides as he processed what his aunt was saying. Kate had been everything he could have hoped for in a wife and future queen, but the recent months had shown them all how fragile even the strongest person could become under extraordinary pressure. She left specific guidance, and continued, her voice softening slightly as she recognized the emotional impact her words were having. Instructions about how the family should respond if Kate ever reached a point where continuing in her role became impossible. Mother called it her mercy protocol. King Charles's eyebrows rose at the unfamiliar term. Throughout his long apprenticeship as heir, he had been privy to many of his mother's private thoughts about the monarchy's future, but this was something entirely new. "Mercy protocol," he repeated. And nodded gravely. Mother believed that true strength sometimes meant knowing when to step back, when to choose personal well-being over public duty. She had seen too many royal marriages destroyed by the relentless demands of the crown. She was determined that wouldn't happen to William and Kate. William's voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke. "What exactly are you saying, Anne?" The Princess Royal took a deep breath before responding. "I'm saying that the Queen, in her wisdom, anticipated this moment. She knew that Kate might one day need to make an impossible choice between her role as future queen and her own survival, both physical and emotional. And she wanted you to know that whatever Kate decides, she has the royal family's complete support." The implications of these words began to sink in. For generations, duty had been paramount in the royal family. Personal desires, health concerns, even happiness had traditionally been subordinated to the needs of the crown and the country. But here was evidence that the Queen herself had recognized the human cost of such unwavering dedication to duty. Charles stood slowly, moving to join his son by the window. Together, they looked out at the grounds where Kate had often walked with their children, where she had found moments of peace away from the constant scrutiny that defined their lives. "She really said that?" Charles asked, his voice filled with a mixture of surprise and relief. In her own words, and confirmed, holding up the letter so they could see the familiar handwriting. She wrote, "The crown has taken enough good people. It will not take Catherine if she chooses to save herself." Mother was very clear that Kate's well-being must come first, even if it means redefining what the future of the monarchy looks like. William's composure finally cracked, and tears began to form in his eyes. The weight he had been carrying, trying to support Kate while maintaining his royal duties, attempting to shield their children from the growing crisis, and wrestling with impossible decisions, suddenly felt more manageable. "I've been so afraid," he admitted. Afraid that asking Kate to step back would be seen as abandonment of duty, afraid that putting her health first would be seen as weakness. And moved closer to her nephew, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Mother understood that the greatest act of strength is sometimes admitting when something isn't working. She lived through enough royal scandals and tragedies to know that pretending everything is fine when it isn't only leads to greater disasters. The three royals stood together in contemplative silence, each processing the revolutionary nature of what the Queen had sanctioned. For decades, the monarchy had been built on the principle of service before self, but here was clear evidence that the late Queen had evolved in her thinking during her final years. "There's more," Anne said after a moment, referring back to the letter. Mother also provided guidance on how such a transition should be handled, how to protect Kate's dignity, how to ensure the children's well-being, and how to maintain the stability of the monarchy during such a significant change. Charles turned from the window, his expression now showing a mixture of admiration for his mother's foresight and concern for the practical implications of her instructions. "What kind of guidance?" he asked. And carefully unfolded another section of the letter. She outlined a gradual withdrawal from public duties, allowing Kate time to focus on her health without the pressure of constant public appearances. She suggested ways to frame such a decision that would garner public sympathy rather than criticism. Most importantly, she emphasized that this should be presented as Kate's choice, made with the full support of her family. The wisdom of these suggestions was immediately apparent to all three men. The Queen had spent 7 decades navigating the complex relationship between the royal family and the British public. Her understanding of how to manage such a sensitive situation while maintaining the monarchy's reputation was unparalleled. William wiped his eyes, his composure returning as he began to see a path forward that didn't require choosing between his wife's well-being and his duty to the crown. "She really thought of everything, didn't she?" he said with a mixture of grief and gratitude. "She thought of you," and replied simply. "All of you." Mother knew that the strength of the monarchy ultimately depends on the strength of the family that represents it. She wasn't willing to sacrifice one for the other. As the morning progressed, the three royals continued to discuss the implications of the Queen's message. They talked about Kate's current condition, the children's needs, and the practical steps that would need to be taken if they decided to act on the Queen's guidance. Throughout their conversation, there was a sense of relief that had been absent from their family discussions for months. The weight of tradition and duty that had seemed so crushing now felt more manageable with the knowledge that they had the late Queen's blessing to prioritize Kate's well-being. It was a gift that none of them had expected, but all recognized as exactly what their family needed to move forward with both integrity and compassion. As Anne prepared to leave, carrying with her the precious letter that had changed everything, she paused at the door. "Mother's final message to all of us was simple," she said. "The crown serves the people, but the family must serve each other first. Everything else is just ceremony." With those words hanging in the air, she left William and Charles to contemplate a future that suddenly seemed full of possibilities rather than impossible choices. The Queen's wisdom, reaching out from beyond the grave, had provided them with exactly what they needed to face the challenges ahead. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Kensington Palace as William made his way through the private gardens toward the greenhouse where Kate often sought solace among her beloved plants. The conversation with Anne and his father had left him with a strange mixture of hope and trepidation. The Queen's message had provided a path forward, but he knew that the most difficult conversation still lay ahead. Kate was tending to a collection of orchids when he found her, her movements careful and deliberate despite the obvious fatigue that had become her constant companion. She looked up as he approached, and he could see in her eyes the same exhaustion that had been growing for months. The vibrant woman who had captured his heart and the nation's admiration seemed to be fading before his eyes, worn down by pressures that no amount of royal training could have prepared her for. "How was your meeting with Anne?" Kate asked, though something in her tone suggested she already suspected the subject matter. She had always been perceptive, able to read the subtle changes in family dynamics that outsiders would never notice. William sat down on the small bench beside her workstation, watching as she continued to carefully tend to the delicate flowers. "She brought a message from my grandmother," he said carefully. "Something she wanted us to know, but only when the time was right." Kate's hands stilled on the orchid she had been examining. "About me?" she asked quietly. "About us," William corrected gently. "About our family, our future, and the choices we might need to make." The greenhouse fell quiet except for the gentle sound of water trickling from a small fountain in the corner. Kate set down her gardening tools and turned to face her husband fully, her expression serious but calm. "What did she say?" William reached for her hands, noting how much thinner they had become in recent months. The stress of her role, combined with her health challenges, had taken a visible toll that no amount of careful makeup could completely conceal. "She said that she understood what you're going through. That she had seen too many good people sacrificed to the demands of the crown, and she was determined not to let that happen to you." Tears began to form in Kate's eyes, but she maintained her composure. "She was always so kind to me," she said softly. "Even when others questioned whether I was suitable for this life, she never made me feel like I had to prove myself to her." "She saw your strength from the beginning," William agreed. "But she also recognized that even the strongest people have limits. She left specific instructions about what should happen if you ever reached yours." Kate looked down at their joined hands, processing the implications of what William was saying. "She knew this day might come," she said, "and it wasn't really a question." William nodded. "She called it her mercy protocol. A way for you to step back from royal duties if continuing became impossible, without it being seen as abandonment or failure." The relief that washed over Kate's face was immediate and profound. For months, she had been struggling with the impossible choice between her own well-being and her duty to the crown. The idea that the Queen herself had anticipated this situation and provided a solution felt like a lifeline she hadn't dared to hope for. "Tell me everything," Kate said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. William spent the next hour carefully explaining Anne's revelations. He told her about the Queen's specific guidance on how such a transition should be handled, her emphasis on protecting Kate's dignity, and, most importantly, her clear statement that Kate's well-being must come first. As he spoke, he watched his wife's expression shift from exhaustion to hope to something that looked almost like peace. "She really said the crown wouldn't take me?" Kate asked when he had finished. Her exact words, according to Anne, William confirmed. "She said the crown has taken enough good people, and it wouldn't take you if you chose to save yourself." Kate stood and moved to the window, looking out at the gardens where their children often played. The sight of the playground equipment and the small garden plot they had helped plant brought a smile to her face for the first time in days. "What about George, Charlotte, and Louis?" she asked.
How would this affect them? The Queen thought of them too, William assured her. Her guidance includes provisions for protecting the children from any negative publicity and ensuring their transition is as smooth as possible. She understood that your well-being directly impacts theirs. Kate turned back to her husband, and he could see a spark of the woman he had fallen in love with returning to her eyes. And you? How do you feel about all this? William stood and joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I feel like we've been given a gift, he said honestly. For months, I've been watching you struggle and feeling helpless to protect you from something that seemed unavoidable. Now we have options. They stood together in comfortable silence, both contemplating a future that suddenly seemed manageable rather than overwhelming. The Queen's wisdom had provided them with something they hadn't realized they desperately needed: permission to choose their family's happiness over traditional expectations. What would it look like practically? Kate asked after a while. If I decided to step back, I mean. William had been thinking about this since his conversation with Anne. Gradual withdrawal from public engagements, more focus on private charitable work that doesn't require constant media attention. We could spend more time at Anmer Hall with the children, away from London and the constant scrutiny. Kate's eyes lit up at the mention of their Norfolk home. Anmer Hall had always been their refuge, the place where they could be a normal family without the weight of royal protocol. The idea of spending more time there, of giving their children a more private childhood, held enormous appeal. The Queen's letter mentioned that such a decision should be framed as a positive choice rather than a retreat, William continued. A conscious decision to focus on family and personal well-being, made with the full support of the royal family. Kate nodded thoughtfully. And the media? They've been so invested in the fairy tale narrative of our marriage and my role as future queen. That's something we'll have to navigate carefully, William admitted. But the Queen's guidance includes suggestions for how to manage public perception. The key is honesty without oversharing, and emphasizing that this decision comes from a position of strength rather than weakness. As evening approached, Kate and William found themselves in deeper conversation than they had managed in months. The weight that had been pressing down on their relationship began to lift as they discussed possibilities they had never dared to consider. The Queen's message had given them permission to prioritize their marriage and family in a way that felt revolutionary within the context of royal tradition. There's something else, William said as they prepared to head back to the main house for dinner with the children. And mentioned that my father was visibly relieved when he heard the Queen's message. I think he's been carrying his own guilt about the pressures placed on royal spouses. Kate squeezed his hand. He's been through his own struggles with the demands of royal life, she observed. Perhaps this will help him feel more confident about making decisions that prioritize family well-being. As they walked back through the gardens, Kate felt lighter than she had in months. The impossible choice that had been keeping her awake at night no longer seemed impossible. The Queen's wisdom had provided a path that honored both her commitment to the royal family and her need to preserve her own health and happiness. When do we need to make a decision? Kate asked as they reached the palace. There's no timeline, William assured her. The Queen's guidance was clear that this should be your choice, made in your own time. Whether you decide to continue in your current role or step back, the family will support you completely. That evening, as they sat down to dinner with George, Charlotte, and Louis, Kate felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. The children chattered excitedly about their day at school, their innocent enthusiasm a reminder of what truly mattered. The Queen's message had given them permission to put family first, and Kate was beginning to understand just how transformative that permission could be. Later, after the children were settled for the night, Kate and William continued their conversation in the privacy of their sitting room. They talked about their hopes for the future, their concerns about public reaction, and, most importantly, their commitment to each other and their children. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that I'm proud of you, William said as they prepared for bed. You've given everything to this role, more than anyone could have expected. If you choose to step back, it won't be because you failed. It will be because you're brave enough to choose what's right for our family. Kate smiled, feeling truly understood for the first time in months. The Queen's message had given her permission to prioritize her own well-being,
but William's support made the choice feel not just possible, but right. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Kate felt hopeful about the future for the first time since her health crisis began. The Queen's wisdom, delivered through Anne's careful stewardship, had provided exactly what their family needed to move forward with both integrity and compassion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but, for the first time in months, Kate felt equipped to face them with confidence and grace.
The following morning brought an unexpected visitor to Kensington Palace.
King Charles arrived unannounced, something he rarely did since ascending to the throne. His security detail had called ahead with only minutes to spare, leaving the household staff scrambling to prepare for a royal visit that wasn't on any official calendar.
William met his father at the private entrance, noting the informal nature of the visit.
Charles wore a simple suit rather than his usual formal attire, and his expression carried a gentleness that had become more pronounced since receiving the Queen's message through Anne. "I hope I'm not intruding," Charles said as they walked toward the family quarters. "I felt we needed to continue yesterday's conversation, and I wanted to speak with Catherine directly." Kate appeared in the doorway of the morning room, looking more rested than she had in weeks despite the early hour. She had always maintained a good relationship with her father-in-law, but recent months had strained their interactions as everyone struggled to navigate the unprecedented situation of her declining health while maintaining public appearances. "Your Majesty," Kate said formally, offering a small curtsy despite the informal nature of the visit. "Please, Catherine," Charles said warmly, "we're family here. I've come to talk with you both about Mother's message and what it means for all of us moving forward." They settled in the comfortable morning room that Kate had redesigned to reflect her own taste while respecting the palace's historical character. The soft lighting and warm colors created an atmosphere that encouraged honest conversation, something that would be essential for the discussion ahead. Charles began by acknowledging what they all knew but had been reluctant to discuss openly. "I've watched you struggle these past months, Catherine, and I've felt helpless to offer you any real relief. Mother's message has changed that, and I want you to know that I fully support whatever decision you make about your future role."
Kate's eyes filled with tears at the unexpected kindness in her father-in-law's voice.
Throughout their relationship, Charles had always been supportive, but the formal nature of royal interactions had sometimes made it difficult to express genuine emotion. The Queen's message seemed to have freed them all to speak more openly about their feelings and concerns.
"I've been so afraid of disappointing you," Kate admitted. "Of letting down the institution that you've served your entire life."
Charles leaned forward, his expression earnest.
"My dear, you could never disappoint me. If anything, I'm the one who should be apologizing. I allowed you to carry burdens that no one should bear alone, and I failed to recognize how those pressures were affecting you."
William watched this exchange with a mixture of relief and admiration for his father's honesty. The rigid hierarchy that typically governed royal relationships seemed to be dissolving, replaced by genuine family concern and affection. "Mother's message made me realize something important," Charles continued.
"For too long, we've treated duty to the crown as if it were separate from or even opposed to personal happiness.
But a monarchy built on the suffering of its members is not sustainable, and it's certainly not what the British people deserve." Kate dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, overwhelmed by the support she was receiving.
"I've tried so hard to be strong, to be the person everyone needed me to be."
"And you have been," Charles assured her. "But Mother understood that true strength sometimes means knowing when to step back, when to choose a different path. She lived through enough royal crises to know that pretending everything is fine when it isn't only leads to greater disasters." The conversation turned to practical matters as they discussed what Kate's gradual withdrawal from public duties might look like. Charles shared insights from his own decades of royal service, acknowledging times when he had wished for more flexibility in balancing personal needs with public expectations.
"The key," Charles explained, "is to frame this as an evolution rather than a retreat.
The monarchy has always adapted to changing circumstances, and your decision to prioritize your health and family would be part of that tradition of adaptation." Kate found herself feeling increasingly hopeful as they talked. The prospect of reducing her public commitments while maintaining her connection to the causes she cared about seemed not just possible but sensible. The Queen's blessing had removed the guilt she had been feeling about wanting to step back from the relentless pace of royal life.
"What about the children?" Kate asked, her maternal instincts always at the forefront of her thinking. How do we protect them from any negative publicity that might result from this decision?
Charles smiled, recognizing the same protective instinct he had felt toward William and Harry during their own challenging childhoods. Mother anticipated that concern as well. Her guidance includes specific suggestions for maintaining the children's privacy while they adjust to any changes in your role. William had been mostly quiet during the conversation, but now he spoke up. I think the children would benefit from having more of your time and attention, he said to Kate. They've been so understanding about sharing you with the public, but they're still young enough to really need their mother.
Kate's face softened at the mention of her children. George, Charlotte, and Louis had indeed been remarkably understanding about the demands of her royal role, but she had often worried about the long-term impact of her frequent absences on their emotional development. There's another aspect to consider, Charles said thoughtfully. Your stepping back from some duties would create opportunities for other family members to take on larger roles. It's a natural evolution that benefits the entire institution. This perspective helped frame Kate's potential decision as something positive for the monarchy as a whole rather than just a personal accommodation. The idea that her choice might actually strengthen the institution by demonstrating its flexibility and humanity was comforting. As their conversation continued, Charles shared stories from his own experience of balancing personal desires with royal duty. He spoke honestly about times when he had felt trapped by expectation and protocol, and how those experiences had shaped his determination to create more flexibility for the next generation of royals. I don't want William to face the same impossible choices that previous generations have had to navigate, Charles said. Mother's message gives us permission to prioritize your family's well-being, and I intend to honor that guidance completely. Kate felt a weight lifting from her shoulders as she listened to her father-in-law speak with such compassion and understanding. The support of both William and Charles would make any transition infinitely easier, both practically and emotionally. I've been thinking about what I truly want, Kate said after a long pause. And I realized that my happiest moments as a royal have been the smaller engagements, the times when I could really connect with people without the pressure of massive media coverage. Those are often the most meaningful interactions anyway, Charles agreed. Grand ceremonial events serve their purpose, but real impact happens in those quieter moments of genuine human connection. This observation helped Kate envision a future role that felt authentic and sustainable. Rather than completely withdrawing from royal life, she could focus on the aspects that brought her joy and fulfillment while stepping back from the more demanding ceremonial obligations. Would it be possible to maintain some charitable patronages while reducing the number of public appearances? Kate asked. Absolutely, Charles assured her. In fact, that kind of focused engagement might be more effective than trying to spread yourself across too many commitments. William reached for Kate's hand, recognizing the hope that was returning to her voice. We could design a role that works for you rather than trying to fit yourself into a predetermined mold, he suggested. The three of them spent the rest of the morning discussing specific possibilities for Kate's future involvement in royal duties. They talked about which charities were closest to her heart, which types of engagements she found most fulfilling, and how to create a schedule that would allow for more family time while maintaining her connection to public service. There's one more thing I want you to know, Charles said as their conversation began to wind down. Mother specifically mentioned in her letter that she was proud of the woman you had become and the mother you were to her great-grandchildren. She wanted you to know that your worth to this family has never been contingent on your ability to fulfill every aspect of the traditional royal role. These words hit Kate with unexpected force, and she found herself crying openly for the first time in months. The validation from the late Queen, delivered posthumously through her son, meant more than any public accolade or media praise ever could. She saw you clearly, Charles continued gently, and she loved what she saw. That love included understanding your limitations and respecting your need to protect yourself and your family. As Charles prepared to leave, he embraced both Kate and William warmly, something that might have seemed unusual in the formal context of royal relationships but felt entirely natural given the emotional honesty of their conversation. Take all the time you need to make your decision, he told Kate. And remember that whatever you choose, you have the full support of your family and the crown itself. After Charles departed, Kate and William sat together in comfortable silence,
both processing the remarkable conversation they had just experienced. The king's support had added another layer of security to their decision-making process, making Kate's potential transition feel not just acceptable but actively supported by the highest levels of the royal family. "I think I know what I want to do," Kate said finally, her voice calm and confident for the first time in months. William squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Whatever you decide, we'll make it work beautifully," he promised. As they began planning the next steps in their journey, both felt grateful for the Queen's wisdom and Charles's compassion, which had transformed what had seemed like an impossible situation into an opportunity for positive change and renewed family strength. 3 weeks had passed since the revelatory conversations that had changed everything for the Wales family. Kate had spent this time in quiet contemplation, surrounded by the support of William and the children, free from the pressure of public appearances for the first time in years. The decision she had reached felt both inevitable and liberating. The morning of their planned announcement dawned clear and bright, with autumn sunlight streaming through the windows of Anmer Hall. Kate had chosen their Norfolk retreat as the setting for this momentous step, wanting to be in the place where their family felt most genuine and grounded when they shared their decision with the world. William found Kate in their private study, reviewing the statement they had crafted together over many careful conversations. The words had been chosen with precision, balancing honesty with dignity, explaining her decision without revealing more personal details than felt appropriate for public consumption. "Are you ready for this?" William asked, settling beside her on the window seat that overlooked the gardens where their children often played. Kate nodded, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced since before her health crisis began. "I think I've been ready for longer than I realized," she said. "I just needed permission to acknowledge what I already knew in my heart." The statement they had prepared was unlike any royal announcement in recent memory. Rather than the formal, distant tone typical of palace communications, it spoke in Kate's own voice about the difficult but necessary choice she was making to step back from full-time royal duties to focus on her health and family. The key phrases had been crafted to reflect the Queen's guidance. This was presented as a positive evolution rather than a retreat, a conscious choice made from a position of strength rather than weakness. The statement emphasized Kate's continued commitment to her most important charitable causes while acknowledging the need for a more sustainable approach to public service. "The children seem excited about having more time with you," William observed, thinking of their enthusiastic response when Kate had explained that she would be attending more of their school events and spending more afternoons helping with homework. Kate smiled, remembering George's delighted face when she had told him she would be able to attend his upcoming school play without having to rush off to another engagement. "They've been so understanding about sharing me with the public. It will be wonderful to give them more of my attention during these important years." And arrived mid-morning, having volunteered to be present for moral support during what would undoubtedly be a challenging day. Her practical nature and unwavering support had been invaluable throughout the decision-making process, and her presence now provided additional confidence for what lay ahead. "The statement is perfect," and said after reviewing their carefully crafted words one final time. "It honors Mother's wishes while clearly communicating your reasons in a way that invites understanding rather than criticism." The three of them spent time discussing the logistics of the announcement and the expected media response. Palace staff had been briefed and were prepared to handle the inevitable flood of inquiries, armed with additional background information that emphasized the family's unity behind Kate's decision. "I keep thinking about what your grandmother wrote," Kate said to William as they prepared to release the statement to the press. "About the crown serving the people, but the family serving each other first. It feels revolutionary to actually live by that principle." William nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. For generations, royal duty had been presented as an absolute obligation that superseded all personal considerations. The Queen's final message had challenged that assumption, creating space for a more humane approach to royal service. King Charles called just before the announcement was scheduled to be released, offering his final words of support and encouragement. His voice carried genuine warmth as he spoke with Kate, reaffirming his complete backing of her decision and his admiration for the courage it had taken to prioritize her well-being. "Remember," Charles told her, "this decision demonstrates exactly the kind of wisdom and strength that the monarchy needs to thrive in the modern world. You're not abandoning your role, you're evolving it." As the statement was released to the media, Kate felt a mixture of nervousness and relief. The words were now public, and there would be no going back to the unsustainable situation that had been slowly destroying her health and happiness. Whatever the public response, she had made a decision that felt authentic and necessary. The initial media reaction was swift and, to their surprise, largely positive. Many commentators praised Kate's honesty and her commitment to mental health advocacy through her own example. Several prominent figures shared their own stories of stepping back from demanding roles to prioritize their well-being, creating a broader conversation about the importance of sustainable approaches to public service. "The public seems to understand," Williams said as they watched the early news coverage together. "People appreciate honesty, especially when it's delivered with such grace and thoughtfulness." Kate felt vindicated in her decision to be open about her reasons rather than hiding behind vague explanations. The Queen's guidance about framing the decision positively had proven wise, as media outlets focused on Kate's courage and the royal family's progressive approach to supporting its members. Throughout the day, messages of support poured in from unexpected sources. Fellow royals from other European monarchies shared their own experiences of balancing duty with personal well-being. Charitable organizations that Kate had worked with expressed their understanding and continued support for her ongoing involvement in their causes. "Look at this," and said, showing them a particularly touching message from a mental health charity Kate had long supported. "They're calling you a role model for showing that seeking help and making difficult decisions about your capacity is a sign of strength, not weakness." The children returned from school that afternoon to find their parents more relaxed and hopeful than they had seen them in months. Kate was able to give them her full attention as they shared stories from their day, no longer distracted by the weight of impossible expectations and unsustainable commitments. "Mummy, are you happier now?" Charlotte asked with the directness that only children can manage. Kate hugged her daughter close. "Yes, darling. Mummy is much happier now." As evening approached, the family gathered in their comfortable sitting room for what felt like the first truly relaxed evening they had shared in months. The announcement had been made, the initial response had been positive, and the future suddenly seemed full of possibilities rather than overwhelming obligations. "What happens next?" Kate asked as they began planning the practical aspects of her transition to a reduced role. "We take it one day at a time," William replied. "We design a life and a role that works for you, for us, and for the children. We honor the Queen's wisdom by putting our family's well-being first." And smiled as she watched her nephew and his wife planning their future with renewed enthusiasm. "Mother would be so proud," she said quietly. She always believed that the monarchy's strength came from the happiness and health of the family that represents it. The following weeks would bring new challenges as they navigated Kate's transition to her redefined role, but the foundation of support they had discovered, from the Queen's posthumous guidance, from King Charles's understanding, and from each other, made those challenges feel manageable rather than overwhelming. That night, as Kate tucked the children into bed, she felt a profound gratitude for the Queen's final gift to their family. The permission to choose their own well-being over traditional expectations had freed them to create a more authentic and sustainable approach to royal service. "Will you still be a princess?" Louis asked sleepily as Kate kissed him goodnight. "I'll always be your mummy," Kate replied, understanding that this was what truly mattered. "And that's the most important job I'll ever have." As she and William settled into bed that night, Kate felt hopeful about the future for the first time in months. The Queen's wisdom had provided them with a path forward that honored both their commitment to public service and their responsibility to their own family's happiness. "Thank you," Kate whispered to William in the darkness. "For what?" he asked. "For supporting my choice. For helping me understand that taking care of myself isn't selfish, it's necessary." William pulled her closer. "Thank you for being brave enough to make the right choice, even when it was difficult." Outside their window, the Norfolk countryside stretched peacefully under the starlight, providing the same sense of sanctuary it had always offered their family. The Queen's message had given them permission to prioritize this peace, to choose the sustainable over the spectacular, and to build a life that honored both their public responsibilities and their private needs. As they drifted off to sleep, both Kate and William felt grateful for the wisdom of a queen who had understood that true strength sometimes meant knowing when to step back, and that the greatest service to the crown was ensuring the happiness and health of those who wore it. The future would bring new challenges, but they would face them together, supported by the love and understanding that had seen them through this difficult transition and would continue to guide them in the years ahead.